Looking for some time management and pacing tips to help you complete your online ESL classes in 25 to 28 minutes? In this video, you'll learn why pacing is important and also how to pace your classes for different types of students and different types of classes as well. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I will give you some quick class time savers. But first, welcome back to my channel, and if it's your first time here, welcome. I'm Keely, I'm the online teacher chick, and I'm coming to you from my ESL classroom in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a Vipkid teacher and mentor, and I help Vipkid applicants get hired and get students. If you want to apply to Vipkid, click the link below and make sure my referral code is entered. It is Keely0001. And if you've already applied but would like my help, or you just find my videos helpful, I'd appreciate it if you would still enter my referral code and use me as your referring teacher on your application. There are instructions on how to do that down there too. So, why is pacing important? Well, it's important to parents, and it's important to Vipkid, and it's your job to please them. So it should be important to you too. But seriously, if you happen to go through class too slowly and not be able to complete it, then the student doesn't get all of the information that they're supposed to get in the class, the information their parents have paid for. And if you move too quickly, then well, you're just responsible for making sure that you have some meaningful extension activities that you can do at the end. You don't want to just put in some quick filler things that don't mean anything because that doesn't really help the student, and parents have also paid, so they'd like to see something helpful. If you need some ideas on what to do when you finish your class early, check down there. I have a video all about that. I don't really think people just get pacing. You know, I heard that something like 2% of Vipkid applicants actually make it through the entire mock lesson. I was not among them. And when I started teaching classes with real students, my class times were like 30, 32, 34 minutes, which can be stressful. Fortunately, I wasn't booked solid. I didn't have like back-to-back classes. But now I'm among those teachers that can say, I finish my classes in about 25 minutes, and I use the 5 minutes between classes to complete student feedback, so that I'm really finished with all of my work by 8 or 9 in the morning. How did I get there? Well, it took time, practice, and the tips that I'll share with you today. One thing to do to help with your pacing, regardless of the student or the lesson you're teaching, is to review the material ahead of time. You want to know, are you teaching a major course, a supplementary course? Are you doing an assessment? When I'm previewing a major course or a supplementary course, I generally take some notes. I make notes of how many slides there are. Well, basically I note which slide number is the goodbye slide. I note which slide number is the goodbye song, if applicable. I note any slides or the numbers of any slides that I think might take extra time. So slides that have reading on them. And I'll write story 8 to 12. So that tells me there's a story on slides 8 to 12. So I know that when I get there, it'll probably take a little bit longer time than the other slides. If it's a let's chat or free talk slide, those can take a longer time with certain students in particular. Certain games take a while, reading comprehension questions, and final project explanations can take extra time also. So having a note of all of that helps me keep on pace as I teach my class. In general, it's a good idea to budget about a minute per slide. And in Vipkid, the level 1 students have more than 25 slides, so you'll be taking a little bit less than a minute per slide. And in level 6, those kids have fewer than 25 slides usually, so you'll probably spend a little bit more than a minute per slide there. It just really helps if you pay attention to your time, what slide you're on, and notes that you have. Those things working together can really help you finish in 25 to 28 minutes and closer to the 25-minute time. If I feel like I'm breezing through a lesson, then first I'll look at my notes to see if there's something coming up that might slow us down. And if there is, then I just keep going. I get to that point and reassess. I might be right on track by then. If there's not something coming up that looks like it might slow us down, then I make sure to extend. With lower level students, I can ask them to count items on the screen. I can ask if they like whatever is in front of them, like, do you like pizza? And with older level students, I might be breezing through a lesson because I have a fast reader. And in that case, I need to do things to slow the student down during the reading. So it's my job to think of extra comprehension questions to ask, or look at ways that my student can connect to the reading and carry on a conversation about how they connect with whatever's there. Maybe I want to ask them if they've ever felt the way a character in a story is feeling, and to share that experience with me. If my student and I are going slowly through the lesson, I still look ahead to my notes to see if there's anything that's going to slow us down even more. And especially if the answer to that is yes, I know I need to help my student pick up the pace. And there are several different types of student that can contribute to a lesson taking a longer time. So one of those types of students is a slow reader. What do you do with a slow reader? Well, you help them. So something that I find helpful is to help them make it through the reading. Sometimes you have a slow reader because the student's reading level isn't quite the same as the level required of them in the lesson. So one thing I do is I'll alternate reading with them, and I found that it's more successful if I start. Because if my student starts, he or she might try to keep going, and cutting them off isn't cool. So I start, and then I say, now your turn. And then they read, and they'll read till the end of the page. And then when we turn the page, I start again. So you can have some control. And actually, sometimes you might need to read more than half, just depending on the student's level and what's being asked of them in the lesson and the time that you have in order to complete the lesson. So you might need to read more, and that's okay. Just make sure to ask your student comprehension questions, especially about the part that you read. So they're not sort of taking a pass or thinking about whatever else is happening later in the day. Keep them engaged. They need to know that they're going to be held responsible for everything that you've gone over in class. And if you have a slow reader, it's a really good idea to recommend in the parent feedback that student practice. And one thing you can recommend is that the student take 20 minutes a day and read out loud in English. And that will help them with their fluency and also their speed. That's a pretty standard recommendation to help someone learn how to read and to read well. It's something that all the kindergarten kids in my daughter's class get recommended to do. So it's a great thing to pass on to your own parents of the kids that you're teaching. You also can recommend that they watch the lesson again and go back to the part in particular where there was reading and read with you as you read with them in the lesson. Repetition is super important in language learning. Okay, so another kind of student that can contribute to a slower lesson is a kid that likes to talk. I personally really like these students because they're really engaged and they're wonderful to hear them think about things out loud and share experiences. You just have to be mindful of your time because it can be really easy to get off track and off topic, and you have a lesson that you're supposed to teach. Again, the parents have paid for the lesson, so you want to make sure you're meeting those objectives. So for the kid that likes to talk, you kind of want to redirect them and you want to get them into the lesson. So one thing you can do is have them, especially focus on the reading. Here's the thing. If you have a kid that likes to talk, this is probably a proficient student and you probably can get through things pretty quickly. So you just want to make sure that that's the focus, and then you have the conversation later. One thing you can do is have the student compete against his or her own time for reading and other activities in the lesson. So you might say, okay, I will set the timer. You read. And then the student reads, you tell them how fast they read, and say on the next page, now try to beat 25 seconds or whatever their time was. And then they're really focused. They don't have time to think about the extra things they want to tell you. They're focused on beating their time. You can also play games with them where you tell them, let's see who can do it fastest, and you compete with them. A word search that's in the lesson would be a good idea for that kind of thing. Another kind of student that can contribute to a slower paced level is the kid that doesn't talk. Awkward. These can feel like super long lessons if you don't get something happening. So what you want to do is remember, it's your job as the teacher to adapt to the student. So if you have a quiet student, maybe they're timid. Maybe you're freaking them out for some reason. But what you want to do is find some way to make them laugh, get them to connect, find something that they enjoy doing. So it might be that you need to get a little silly with it, pull out some puppets. Be mindful of the student's age. Probably if they're not talking, they're younger. And you can use the stickers that are inside the portal. I've had lots of kids laughing over those stickers. Pull out some props that are interesting. Talk to your puppet yourself. Just get them paying attention and try to get them to give some output. So just a note here, it really helps your pacing if you know your student. Now, there are lots of different kinds of students you can have. You could have a regular student or a new student. You could have a beginning, intermediate, or advanced student. It could be a trial student. It could be a student taking a supplementary lesson or a major course student. There are lots of choices. And obviously, if this is a new student, you don't know them. But there are some things that you can do to help. One is to check out the teacher feedback on students. Look at what teachers have been saying about the students' performance in class and make a note of the marks that they got on their last major course. You can see, is their reading excellent or not? How's their grammar? You can look and see what the previous teacher thought and keep that in mind. You don't have to base everything you think on what other people have said. Of course, give your own mini assessment in the beginning of the lesson. Use the warm-up for that. See how the student responds to you. Is the student a student that can read? Can the student read well? Those are things that you can tell right away from the beginning and sort of make a note on how you'll need to proceed and adapt to the student. And as for pacing tips for unit assessments, still preview the lesson. Note how many slides more or less, but I think more importantly, note how many levels the student needs to complete in the assessment. Is it 5? Is it 6? Because that way you can make a mental note of how long it should take you to finish each level. If there are 5 levels and 25 minutes, then that equates to 5 minutes per level. When you finish level 1, you should be 5 minutes into the class, and if you're not, adjust accordingly. Another thing to pay attention to is what exactly a student needs to do to get full points on the assessment. Does she need to read all 6 words accurately or just 4? Because if it's just 4 and the student gets the first 4 correct, you don't need to go any further in that question. You can move to the next one. Does the student need to complete a task independently, or can he receive help and still get full points? You may have noticed, or perhaps you've just heard, there are a lot of slides in unit assessments, and that's true, but not all of them require very much time at all. There's a choose your character slide, and the kid literally says Meg or Mike. That takes almost no time. And the ones that say level 1, begin, just about no time. Still be mindful of your time. It's not cool to rush through a unit assessment at the very end. Make sure that when you ask a student a question, you give him or her a reasonable amount of time to answer. If you don't get the answer, or if you don't get anything, try to help a little. Give them a little time to get the answer. If you still can't get there, give them the answer and move on, and that's okay. If you have extra time at the end, then you can always go back and review the question. It's better to have the extra time at the end than to not be able to finish the assessment. Whatever happens, just be honest in your feedback. If a student earns low scores, then they need to have the low scores. I'm one of those teachers that when I worked in a classroom, I told my students, I don't give you grades. You earn grades. So if you're mad, you earned it. Take it up with yourself. So if the student earns a certain grade, make sure that they get it. Some people are kind of timid about this or afraid to give a low score because they're afraid that parents will complain. But also imagine, if you were the parent, wouldn't you want an accurate account of your kid's abilities, like how well your student is doing in this class? I know I would. It's just important to make a note in the feedback. So you can always say, with help, Elsa was able to blah, blah, blah. And then you can see on the scoring sheet if full points require something to be done independently, but the student did it with help, they didn't get full points. They didn't earn full points. I've never had any parent complaints about this, but should some arise, then your feedback, as well as the recording of your class, should serve to invalidate those complaints. I promised some quick class time-saving tips, and I have 4. Number 1, only spend a short amount of time on the warm-up material. It's not designed to do anything more than really get you started and get the student warmed up for class. It is not the objective of the lesson, so don't get stuck here. Trust me, it really sucks to have taken too long in the warm-up and to play catch-up throughout the whole lesson. It's not fun. So just get something going, move on. Number 2, use TPR and model with your student in your class. That will do so much for reducing the level of possible confusion and students just staring at you not knowing what to do. When you model and you use TPR, then students can quickly catch on and move forward in the class. Number 3, don't use incidental language. Nothing extra, just be clear and direct. That's something else that will reduce the possibility of confusion in your class. Just be clear, show the students what you want, and don't say too much extra stuff. And number 4, remember scaffolding with I do, we do, you do, as opposed to relying on I do, you repeat. There is a place for repetition in your classes, especially when students are learning something new. But kids are very intelligent and they can sort of catch on to a pattern. So if, one slide says corn and they repeat corn and then look, corn, then they do that. And the next slide does the same thing with beans. You probably can just say beans and they can repeat it. And you can do a little symbol and they'll say, oh, look, beans. The idea is that it takes less time for a student to take the cue from your symbol and do something than for them to listen to you and repeat you. So that can just help you with your pacing, remembering to scaffold, which you're supposed to do anyway. All right, those are my time management and pacing tips for today. I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, please give it a like and remember to subscribe and click the bell to get notified when I release new videos on teaching ESL, teaching online, and getting hired and having success with Vipkid. Thank you so much for being here. Bye for now.